I thank the President of the Republic of Djibouti for his statement, and the Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency James Wani Igga, Vice President of the Republic of South Sudan.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in spite of the fact that South Sudan was born 11 years after the Millennium Summit in New York in September 2000, which set the goals that aimed at improving the surroundings for mankind in the world, the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, have become benchmarks that shall guide our planning for decades to come. While we might have been realistically included in the time frame as a country set by such noble undertakings simply because we were not yet born, we nevertheless achieved something in that direction, and within our own parameters and time frames. As for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, along with their 169 targets, apparently it is going to cost the world nearly $45 trillion just in 1 year, and they clearly are overlapping. An uphill task as it seems, South Sudan has confined and just selected 6 out of the goals according to our priorities. And these are: number 1, food security and agriculture; number 2, infrastructure including roads; number 3, energy and hydropower; number 4, health; number 5, education; and 6, economic growth alongside full productive employment. As the government, we possess the will, but our chief impediment will certainly be financing. Ladies and gentlemen, the gap between the industrialized and developing worlds should not be so closed through employing the same patterns of economic growth, which have damaged the environment. While the developed world remains exclusive emitter of the greenhouse gases responsible for climate change, we in the third world must be assisted to promote green energy production for powering our eminent industrial growth. Preventing the negative socio-economic implications of ecological damage and the need for energy and financial resources are competing priorities facing countries that are emerging from protracted civil wars. One of the main triggers of the 21-year war for independence in South Sudan was also related to preventing an ecological damage that would have been created by draining one of the largest 5 wetlands in the world, almost 57,000 square kilometers. As large oil deposits have been discovered in the South, we call on the world to help us make the necessary trade-off to maintain the ecology of this vital global resource known as the South region in South Sudan. Indeed, the conflict between the ecology and the economy, which preoccupied the agenda of the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment in Stockholm in 1972, remains today the key challenge of sustainable development in South Sudan. We are more than committed to achieving that balance required of us as members of the global community. As we do so, we strongly believe in the positive spirit of the United Nations Conference on Development Financing. This is Rio 20, as it advocated for strong support to developing countries for attaining sustainable development goals. To that end, there are important prerequisites for us to journey together towards achieving these noble goals. One of them is that the regional-based intergovernmental committees, which are going to work closely with the UN General Assembly in terms of employing international financial resources and technical know-how, should be given due weight. This will generate a cooperative environment where the peculiar obstacles to sustainable development in Africa shall be effectively addressed. Your Excellencies, to conclude, I must underline that South Sudan is extremely rich in terms of minerals and other natural resources, but they remain untapped. While we remain among the least developed countries, the developed countries in the world, services have improved in numerous mushrooming urban centers of the country. We invite you to come and hold one of the expected numerous such conferences on sustainable development in South Sudan. Considering the fact that my country has zero greenhouse gas emissions, South Sudan rich and untapped natural resources make the country a suitable test case for implementing the post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. Our nation, precisely located in the midpoint of our continent, stands to be a positive, reckonable contributor to the Sustainable Development Agenda. We are definitely firm in that direction, especially with the favorable climate of peace and stability now consolidating in my country. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I thank the Vice President of the Republic of South Sudan for his statement. The Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency Mohammed Nawaz Sharif, Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Prime Minister Lars Rasmussen, Under Secretary General Mr. Getu, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to join you at this defining moment of our times by adopting the post-2015 development agenda. We as the global community are committing ourselves to a shared vision of inclusive growth and development, ensuring that no one is left behind. This is an agenda reflective of both ambition and action in our joint effort against poverty, hunger, and human deprivation. At the beginning of this century, we had committed to a development agenda that brought international focus on poverty, poverty eradication, and human development. By putting people and their needs at the center, the Millennium Development Goals reshaped decision-making processes and redefined national priorities. As a result, over 1 billion people were rescued from extreme poverty. Substantial gains were also made in defeating hunger, illiteracy, and disease. While our accomplishments were many, these were varied and unevenly diffused. Poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity remain stark realities of our time. Excellencies, the post-2015 development agenda is our collective response to these challenges. It represents a giant leap forward. The 17 broad and cross-cutting Sustainable Development Goals and the 169 associated targets chart a developmental-centric and growth-oriented pathway. The agenda posits itself on the three dimensions of sustainable development: social justice, environmental stewardship, and economic well-being. It is thus an agenda of change which enjoys inherent vitality as well as wide social acceptability. The focus is on transforming our economies and livelihoods, building cohesive, just and peaceful societies, and protecting our planet. Poverty eradication remains at its core. Excellencies, our journey does not end here. It has only just begun. The scope and magnitude of this new development framework is enormous. Delivering on it would require unwavering political will both at the national and the international levels. Its implementation requires a paradigm shift in our political, social, economic and developmental outlook. We know from our national experience that strong and sustained economic growth has to be at the heart of any effort to achieve these goals. Social development necessitates synergies among key development priorities, including employment generation, energy security, demographic challenge, disaster risk reduction, and governance. It entails expanding access to energy and infrastructure and making these available to a larger proportion of the population. Addressing systematic issues and structural constraints would be equally important. Credible and realistic data would underpin our success. These are all critical enablers for success. And most importantly, meaningful implementation of this agenda demands matching resources. The Addis Ababa Action Agenda provides a promising start. It complements the means of implementation outlined in the new development framework. We must deliver on these commitments. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, development strategies remain first and foremost national undertakings. Eradication of poverty, disease and provision of a better living are among our abiding commitments to our people. For Pakistan, the Sustainable Development Goals complement our own developmental needs and priorities. As articulated in our Vision 2025, this document provides a policy framework for the integration of the new goals in our national economic and development planning. It is also a blueprint of our political commitment to the process. The government has initiated a series of wide-ranging reforms inter alia aimed at expanding the resource base, stemming illicit capital outflows, and ensuring optimized use of existing resources. We are equally aware of the importance of a robust monitoring and follow-up mechanism for effective and full implementation of the SDGs in Pakistan. Elaborate coordination and oversight procedures have accordingly been put in place at both the national and the provincial levels. Excellencies, we also have a historic opportunity to reverse the threatening tide of climate change. We must therefore negotiate an outcome in Paris that is fair, equitable, and guided by the principles of the UN Climate Change Convention. While we do our part, we look forward to a reinvigorated global partnership that promotes and complements domestic policies and priorities in line with our developmental needs. I thank you.
Thank you. I thank the Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan for his statement. The Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency Charles Michel, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Belgium.
Mr. President, Secretary General, Heads of Delegation, the 2030 Agenda should represent new impetus for our global commitment. The challenges we face are many and largely interdependent. For example, climate and migration, poverty and hunger, peace and security, or radicalization as well. Some of these are the causes or the consequences of the others. Some of these challenges exacerbate the others. To face these challenges, we need to share a universal and ambitious vision. But above all, we need to share a vision for real transformation for our fellow citizens. The time for assessments and reports has passed. Now is the moment to act, and to act in an organized and consistent fashion. The heart of our action should be to succeed in responding to the needs of current generations without jeopardizing the needs of future generations. The 2030 Agenda can be our compass for the 15 years to come. It is a universal, integrated and interdependent agenda. 70 years after the foundation of the United Nations, more than ever, multilateralism is essential to face the main challenges of this century. Our action has a solid foundation, the human rights. Belgium defends an approach founded on fundamental freedoms: gender equality, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, freedom of the press, and the rule of law. These are, at every turn, the path to development. We do not see famine in a country where the press is free. That was what Amartya Sen said, and I believe deeply in the correctness of that assertion. I would ask everybody to think about it. Presidents, Secretary General, colleagues, I'd like to outline a couple of points that are important to my country. First of all, peace and security. Conflict destroys the hopes of men and women for a dignified life. Our efforts will come to nothing without peace and without security. We must mobilize to push back war and conflict. Social inclusion, decent work, and social protection are essential in guaranteeing sustainable growth. The fight against inequality is an integral part of our aspiration of dignity for all. This struggle also goes via non-discrimination, to which there can be no exception. I would condemn all forms of racism, but I'd also like to touch on other forms of discrimination that we see every day based on gender or sexual orientation. And from this high rostrum, I'd like to call for an appeal for the rights of homosexuals. Under no circumstances anywhere in the world should homosexuality be considered a crime, and we will be the tireless advocates for this cause. Women's rights and equality with men shouldn't just be guaranteed, they should also be reality. Access to education for girls should put an end to the incredible waste of human resources. Access to reproductive health, guarantee for sexual rights, access to family planning or contraception, these are all issues which I refuse to shy away from simply because they make some people uncomfortable. From here, I would like to state the wish that all of these barriers and taboos should fall. Finally, I'd like to talk about digitization and access to the internet. This is also an area with potential for development. We must, of course, however, avoid two main pitfalls. Internet access cannot be used as a means for violating or controlling the private life of people, and on the other hand, it cannot be used as a vehicle to broadcast hatred, extremism or radicalism. Excellencies, colleagues, Belgium is also committed through its development aid. We have decided to devote half of our development aid to the least developed countries, and we've also made a pledge at the Addis Ababa Conference on Financing for Development. Besides public development aid, we also need to mobilize all of the other sources of aid. I'm thinking of resources within countries and also their effective use. Finally, of course, the private sector is also a determining, a decisive partner in facing development challenges. Transparency, the fight against corruption, and rule of law are here key areas. The private sector is, of course, a driver of economic growth, and both public and private initiatives should be mutually reinforcing. In this framework, the modification of non-sustainable modes of production and consumption are a main objective. Economic growth needs to go together with sustainable production and consumption. Today, innovations target a balance between reducing negative impact on the environment and the improvement in quality of life. We would advocate large-scale investment in such initiatives. Excellencies, colleagues, the real work should start now. The size of the task requires the commitment of all countries. Belgium and all of its institutions is committed, and each needs to take part in this universal vision. From the same way of thinking, each citizen can carry out daily acts that would facilitate human rights and the respect for our planet. Access to information and education for sustainable development should also be encouraged. We also should work to evaluate the progress that's been accomplished and should compare what's being done with the fundamental indicators. In conclusion, I'd like to stress the importance of the work that's been done within the United Nations framework. We have been working for several months now to draw up the objectives for the 2030 agenda. Each party has demonstrated their responsibility and solidarity. We are now met here today at the highest level to commit together. Belgium has always been an advocate of this multilateralism that is proactive and effective, and I hope that this 2030 agenda will be a success of this century, but that success will depend on us and on our tenacity. From this high rostrum, we must ensure that those who succeed us will be able to state with pride that there has been a positive outcome from the process that begins today, and that they can say, we have succeeded. I thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Belgium for his statement. The Assembly will now hear a statement by Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, Prime Minister of the People's Republic of Bangladesh.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we join all the people in adopting a universal agenda for sustainable development. I commend all those who contributed to the people-centered agenda. In 2000, I joined the world leaders to adopt the Millennium Declaration. Over the past 15 years, we mobilized our people and resources to realize the commitments that we made. We are happy that we attained almost all MDG targets, including those related to poverty eradication, reduction of mother and child mortality, communicable diseases, Realization of the MDGs has helped Bangladesh towards graduation as a middle-income country. A key to our success was our political commitment and conducive policy environment that we created in Bangladesh. We mobilized our national resources, enhanced capabilities, and empowered people. We aligned our development policies and strategies early. We engaged in partnership with a wide range of local and international actors. We also developed numerous innovation and development solutions across sectors. We ensured that inequality does not rise and our actions directly benefit people. We are pleased that some of our solutions and experience are now part of the global solutions and agenda. Building in our experience, Bangladesh joined a long-drawn process to craft a transformative agenda. Now, we all must place to full and effective realization of the Agenda 2030 and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. To deliver on the SDGs, robust global cooperation is critical. In realizing the agenda, we have to recognize the diverse national realities, capacities, and levels of development. Respecting national policies and priorities will be equally important. We will have to address all forms of inequalities across the agenda. In this collective journey, the international community must deliver on the means of implementation for each goal and across the agenda. We need support on finance, technology, capacity building, and debt. We must ensure that global trading and financial regime and institutions are fair and just. Yesterday, we adopted Agenda 2030 with great joy. As part of our national preparation, Bangladesh is aligning its 7th five-year development plan with the new global agenda. We have decided on setting up new national mechanism to coordinate implementation in the government under overall supervision of my office. We all look forward to deliver with similar ambition, focus, and commitment on a global deal on climate change this December in Paris. In Bangladesh, climate change puts our precious development gains at risk. Therefore, we must ensure that this development agenda and the new climate deal deliver on protecting and harnessing the present and future humanity. Let us all work together to deliver on our Agenda 2030. I thank you all.
Thank you to the Prime Minister of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. The Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency Keith Mitchell, Prime Minister of Grenada.
Mr. President and Prime Ministers, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen all. There is an old African proverb that says that if you want to travel fast, you go alone. But if you want to travel far, you go together. unquote. In many ways, Mr. President, our path as a global civilization since the Industrial Revolution has a path for speed and individualism. This has been well documented in the award-winning economic treaty entitled Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty. The road straight ahead does not go very far, Mr. President. It commits all of humanity and the unborn generations to an inhospitable world of 4 degrees above pre-industrial levels, according to a World Bank report. It is a world of floods, droughts, and famines, a world of mass migrations where surely communities will rise up against communities and nations against nations. In the words of the Holiness Pope Francis in this very hall, and I quote, "Any harm done to the environment is harm done to humanity," unquote. The world of floods, drought, and famine and mass migration is not down the road. It's happening right now, Mr. President. 2015 is set by the warmest year on record since records began in 1880. We built this United Nations, Mr. Secretary General, for the express purpose of avoiding these great calamities. We build this United Nations so that we may go together and so that we go very far. At this very moment in history, the entire future of our planet and human civilization has come to a fork in the road. It offers a new pathway, a broader pathway for many, not just a few. It is a pathway towards a greener and cleaner world and a more just world. A world where we can travel together and go very far together. The late Yogi Berra once said, and I quote, "When you come to a fork in the road, you take it," unquote. In my tri-island state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, more and more ordinary Grenadians are seeing themselves as shepherds of the environment. Once considered to be below the hurricane belt, our country has had 2 successive hurricanes in recent history, which devastated our people and caused damages of 200% of GDP. On greening our economy, we have worked to create a new Electricity Act with a view to going 100% renewables. This is in line with the Sustainable Development Goals SDG number 7 on energy, on SDG 13 on climate. The United States selected Grenada as a pilot country for the transformation of the power sector in the Caribbean, and we are grateful for that help. We are also appreciative of the support of China, Venezuela, Germany, New Zealand, and others as we seek to manage our energy challenges and transform this important sector. SDG number 17 on partnerships is therefore deeply ingrained in our approach, and we also wish to commend CISDOC, which is an international partnership for renewable energy in small island development states. As part of our green economy, we have also introduced a price on carbon through a fuel levy, which is helping to improve our fiscal space. We are also introducing climate-smart agriculture in line with SDG 13 and 15. Collectively, sisters and brothers, Grenada
and its islands have 348 square miles of territory. But beyond this, we have 26,000 square kilometers of blue ocean space. Grenada's blue economy, therefore, is vital and is exemplified by our coastal tourism that is the main driver of our economy. This is why we have committed to conserve 20% or more of our near-shore marine resources. And in line with SDG number 14 on oceans, we are pleased to be working with the government of the Netherlands, the World Bank and others, and Global Action Network for Blue Growth and Food Security, and also a Blue Grenada investment strategy. Moreover, in April 2016, working with our partners, Grenada will host a Blue Growth Investment Conference designed to move the needle on ocean health and wealth. This conference, Mr. President, will place ocean states in a better position to report positive results when we meet in Fiji in 2017 to review the progress on SDG 14. Grenada also joins with Dominica and the Marshall Islands to promote a new initiative called We Are the Oceans, which will begin by educating our young people. Mr. Secretary General, this brings me to a final point, SDG number 4, on education. Education is a critical one for the future of our children, as we know, and for the entire planet. I stand before you today, Mr. President, because I was among the fortunate to be afforded an education. But not enough of our young people at home and abroad are getting access to quality education. And this is why my government has set aside the largest portion of our operating fiscal budget for education. Already education represents 20% of Grenada's GDP. And the St. George's University in Grenada, which is training more and more Grenadians, also produces 1 in every 100 doctors practicing in the United States. Finally, Mr. President, as part of my duty as Head of Science and Technology for the Caribbean community, I want to welcome President Obama's invitation for us in the Caribbean to meet with the U.S. government and the U.S. ICT industry in Silicon Valley. Efforts such as these not only underscore the spirit of partnership, but also point the way forward for better education, more innovation, and more jobs as we seek to reduce poverty and inequality in this world, in line with SDG number 1 on poverty, and number 5 on gender, and number 8 on employment, and number 9 on industry and innovation. In closing, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, I wish to applaud your efforts in presiding over the United Nations at this time, when we have chosen a new path for a more sustainable world. With your continued leadership as we head towards this COP21 in Paris and beyond, we feel confident that we, as a global community, are taking the right fork in the road. We can be assured of Grenada's full support as we take this new pathway for our people, for our planet, for peace and prosperity. One where we'll all go together and we'll go very far in that direction. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I thank the Prime Minister of Grenada for his statement. The Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency Haji Tun Abdul Razak, Prime Minister of Malaysia.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, The Millennium Development Goals adopted in 2000 set targets to be delivered by 2015. And in those last 15 years, there have been many significant achievements. The world has also become far more inclusive. Access to education, health, information, communication technology, and job opportunities have widened significantly. The MDGs also brought national governments, the international community, civil society, and the private sector together to work towards a common set of goals. It galvanized the necessary political commitment, resources and actions, and the results show what can be achieved when we recognize our common humanity and put our fellow men first. At the same time, progress has been uneven. Millions are still suffering, especially the poorest and those disadvantaged, because of their gender, age, disability, ethnicity, or even geographic location. Targeted efforts will be needed to reach the most vulnerable. Even today, around 800 million people still live in poverty and suffer from hunger. We may have met the target of halving extreme poverty rates, but the world is still far from reaching the overall goal of eradicating poverty and hunger. This then must remain at the core of the post-2015 development agenda, and it is imperative that it is one that leaves no one behind. Malaysia is absolutely committed to the post-2015 agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, and our aspirations to transform the world by 2030. For inclusivity and sustainable development have long been at the heart of our own transformation from a developing country to one that is on course to achieving high income status by 2020. Between 1970 and 2014, the incidence of poverty in Malaysia was reduced from 49.3% to 0.6%, while hardcore poverty has been eradicated. Mean household monthly income has increased more than 20-fold from $77 in 1970 to $1,781 in 2014. Malaysia is now about to embark on its next 5-year development plan, the 11th Malaysia Plan from 2016 to 2020. In many aspects, the plan mirrors the multidimensional nature of the SDG and has been formulated with the people at the center of all development efforts. What we refer to as the people economy will be given priority, reinforcing my government's commitment to bring further development to our citizens by enriching their lives, providing them with dignity, and raising their potential to share in growth and the fruits of prosperity. For the first time in Malaysia's history, national growth targets will include not only GDP growth and per capita income, but also household income and the Malaysian Well-being Index. We are committed to ensuring equitable opportunities for all, and the bottom 40% households in particular. This will be done through initiatives that are focused on outcome-based support and productivity-linked assistance, and will include entrepreneurship, skills training, technology adoption, asset ownership, and investment in improving connectivity and basic amenities. By 2020, we aim to double the average income for the bottom 40% household from $700 in 2014 to $1,500, elevating them into middle class. We will also raise the participation rate of women in the workforce from 53% to 59% by 2020, and we will transform rural areas by improving connectivity and mobility and aid them in becoming ever more business-friendly environments. We are working towards providing equal access to quality health care, affordable housing, and will be building more clinics and hospitals and affordable homes over the next few years. We are determined to be good custodians of our environment so that we preserve our natural resources and beautiful landscape for future generations. Green growth is no longer an option for idealists, but a practical necessity for us and for other governments around the world. All this because we recognize that human capital is the most important resource for development, not just in Malaysia, but throughout our United Nations. And on that note, may I reaffirm Malaysia's commitment to support and implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. A better future for all is not just within our grasp, it is also the duty of all to fight for it, and I urge all present to join us in this noble and necessary endeavor. I thank you.
Doy las gracias al primer.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister of Malaysia for that statement. The Assembly will now hear from His Excellency Matteo Renzi, Prime Minister of the Republic of Italy.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. This is the time to erase poverty and hunger and guarantee a safe ecosystem to the future generations. First of all, I would like to commend the action of the Secretary General and the organization elites for moving forward the debate on the new agenda for sustainable development. It's an achievement in itself. We have come up with a common agenda with universal goals to be applied everywhere, regardless of the different levels of development, promoting effective development and sustainability, breaking new ground in the way we will act in the coming years. It's both an opportunity and at the same time it's a responsibility. What we need now is a global action, finally. Each nation is in condition to try and to win this very important challenge. The Agenda 2030 envisages a truly new global partnership, not only among governments, parliaments, NGOs, business, citizens, everyone has a role to play. And an unequivocal new global deal based on 5 P: people, prosperity, partnership, but also planet and peace, a legacy to deliver the next generation. Italy is ready to make a very good job in this direction. First of all, because Italy is the first troops contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping operation, but we know we need some more important than only peacekeeping. After peacekeeping, we need an investment in education, initiatives, promotion. For these reasons, the new framework of sustainable development encompasses peace and security, rule of law and promotion of human rights, and effective and democratic governance and institutions. Mr. President, I feel compelled to take the opportunity of this extraordinary summit to speak about the absolute drama that is unfolding since too long now over the Mediterranean Sea. Shores that were the cradle of a civilization have become the stage for daily unjustified strains, unbelievable sufferings, and unacceptable loss of lives. The flux of countless desperate people trying to reach Europe and fulfill the simple aspiration of the decent life has not precedent, and it's the result of both poverty and wars, lack of development and extremism. Too many have died. Many more have been rescued in the open sea. I am proud for the result and the efforts of my people. But these people without a land, who, as Pope Francis called them, who escape from Africa and other countries, need an answer very clear today. Italy is aware of its moral responsibility with the European Union and other colleagues, and we hope finally we achieved a very important result of common European asylum system, because this is the only solution, not the build of walls. A common European asylum system. But at the same time, we know there is a new strategy in front of us. Our new agenda is a very good start. And we adheres to this Agenda 2030 in every sector: national green acts, initiatives particularly in the food and nutritional security in the framework of Expo, the international exhibition in Milan, a platform that Italy offered to the world for the global discussion on nutrition. The vast majority of the countries here represented are participating, and for us this is a reason of pride. Let me recall the message that comes from Milan: feeding the planet, energy for life, a visionary motto chosen more than 8 years ago, which touched directly our discussion today. But at the same time, we are ready to work in the correct direction in every field. I personally participated in the Addis Ababa conference on financing for development. I think it's absolutely important that when Italy will lead G7 in 2017, become a country leader also in the most relevant donors. I think we can absolutely consider Italy is a place of dialogue with Europe and Africa, particularly as a bridge. Italy is a bridge geographically. I think we must be a cultural bridge. And obviously a very great important investment in the energy security, in the small and medium enterprise, in the microcredit, in the public programs for development. And let me conclude also with a particular underline about the people who suffer very much the situation of today, the countries that pay the highest price, particularly the small islands, developing states, and Africa. But I think after this purpose, after this idea, we can absolutely give a message of hope, because I think the new agenda calls for a new collective effort could really give a new hope for the future generation. Let me conclude, Mr. President, with a personal note. International aid, international cooperation is the reason why I am a politician. As a young man entering politics as a volunteer 20 years ago, I was already passionate about the impact of development assistance on ordinary policy, ordinary people, ordinary human beings. That made me understand I wanted to run for office and make a difference. Because politics is that, the possibility to make a difference, not only at the level of governments, but also for the people who stay outside of here. So, 20 years later, as a Prime Minister of my country, I'm particularly honored to have the possibility to give the message with you. Agenda 2030 is not simply an occasion for international community. It's the best occasion to transform the fear in hope. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the Prime Minister of the Republic of Italy for that statement. The Assembly will now hear a statement from His Excellency Habib Assid, Head of Government of the Republic of Tunisia.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure at the outset of this statement to thank and applaud Mr. Ban Ki-moon and all those who have participated in bringing about the success of the negotiations on the post-2015 development agenda for sustainable development. And to them, I wish to express my esteem for their efforts in this area. I am not but a little proud to be taking part in this exceptional summit today, a summit convened by the United Nations, which is a reflection of the maturity of the awareness of how important and key development is and how this issue links to all mankind's aspiration to be able to enjoy happiness without any discrimination and have a right to a dignified life, well-being, security, and balanced development, a right for all countries. Ladies and gentlemen, Tunisia adopted a development policy which, in working with civil society, and it works around the complementarity between demographic factors, environmental factors, and development factors in an integrated manner, which includes both development plans and sectorial policies to that end. Tunisia's success in meeting most of the Millennium Development Goals reflects the seriousness of the country's efforts and national efforts in conjunction with worldwide efforts geared to meeting the challenges of development around the world. And yet, our success is a relative success because we still have failures in the form of gaps in development from one region to another, also a persistent high level of unemployment, which has a negative impact on the economic development. Despite the weight of these challenges, post-revolutionary Tunisia has adopted deep-seated policy reforms. It has thus managed to consolidate the principles of the Republic, the fundamental values of democracy and human rights, all of which are enshrined in our Constitution of our Second Republic. We also work towards a collective approach to reform based on a national vision. This national vision was developed by way of a 5-year development plan based on social justice and based on policies of positive reaffirmation in order to rectify discrimination in the past. Ladies and gentlemen, Tunisia has effectively joined the effort in developing the post-2015 development agenda. It was involved in the open-ended working group in order to define sustainable development goals for this agenda. As such, we were actively engaged in the various meetings and participated actively in the negotiations between governments with a view to defining the objectives of sustainable development. But Tunisia has also undertaken a number of initiatives, such as consultative meetings with the capital city and in the region. We further prepared cooperation with specialized UN agencies and have developed surveys. What kind of development would you like to see? Based on the results of these surveys, with a sample of 10,000 Tunisia citizens which participated in the survey and shared their views and aspirations with regard to national development, Tunisia has defined its plans. Tunisia has also been planning for its participation in this summit and wishes to express its views on the matter. And we would reiterate that continued plagues which affect societies such as terrorism, a lack of security, and interfaith and ethnic conflict, all of these plagues require serious effort on our part, which take into account development situations, especially in the most disadvantaged regions of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, the objectives of the post-2015 development agenda depend on how serious the international community is in translating these goals into concrete reality on the ground, so that no one is left behind, no one is left on the side of the road, and no one is excluded. Tunisia is concerned about establishing a framework and mechanisms for follow-up as necessary to ensure that these objectives are implemented. And to that end, we are establishing partnerships with all stakeholders in civil society, government, and international organizations in full transparency with credibility and seriousness. And finally, I could not conclude without reiterating my gratitude to all members of the international community for having worked towards the aspirations of all mankind in order to develop well-being, all of which are principles behind the 2030 plan. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muchas gracias, señor primer ministro.
Thank you very much to the head of government of the Republic of Tunisia for that statement, Mr. Assid. We will now hear for His Excellency Mr. Alexis Tsipras, Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is very important that our post-2015 agenda addresses the interrelated challenges of eradicating poverty and achieving sustainable development by introducing a single set of new goals that call for a balance between the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of development. But the questions remain. How can we ensure that in the next 15 years we do not repeat the same mistakes as the last 15 or the 15 before that? Why is it that in the last 30+ years the security, economic, social and environmental challenges we face on a global and regional level stay the same or get even worse? Our experience in Greece could be instructive. Greece is at the center of 3 overlapping crises: a Eurozone economic crisis as a result of neoliberal policy choices that led to a 25% decrease in our GDP in the last 5 years, a security crisis because of the increasing instability surrounding Greece in North Africa, in the Middle East and the Black Sea, and a refugee crisis resulting in the mass migration of hundreds of thousands of people seeking a better life in Europe. In order to face such challenges, we must set and strive for goals such as the ones we discussed today, but our experience in Greece shows that this is not enough. No one of the challenges we face in Greece, in our broader region, in Europe or even in a global level, can be dealt with solely by setting goals and leaving the framework in which we function untouched and beyond dispute. We cannot talk sustainability about, we cannot talk substantially about aid in developing countries or loans in developed ones unless we tackle the issue of debt as an international challenge at the center of our global financial system. In all covenant fora, including this one, we need to talk about how restructuring or reprofiling of public debt can be linked with development. Historical experience shows that the debt restructuring is necessary for recovery, even for developed countries, as it happens for Germany in 1953. We cannot talk about eradicating poverty or unemployment unless we can discuss how to build or improve welfare states instead of destroying them. We must distance ourselves from the neoliberal idea that markets are the sole resource allocator in the economy. And we cannot talk about a solid state tax base on the basis of a global financial system that encourages tax havens and the founding of offshore companies. Just the same way, we cannot talk about a solid tax system unless democratically elected governments retain the right to decide who they will lay the tax burden on. A substantial development agenda can only take root in an economic, financial and political environment that fosters development. And Greece, as a pillar of stability in our region, will consistently promote and support all efforts for such a global and European economic and financial system. A system that will allow our agenda to flourish in the next 15 years rather than suffocating it as it did in the last 30 years. Of course, this will not be easy. As a great economist said, the difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping from old ones. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic. The Assembly will now hear a statement from His Excellency Mr. Franz Timmermans, First Vice President of the European Union.
Thank you. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it's astonishing just how much has happened since the Millennium Summit. We all know the figures, but if you actually picture them, the people behind them, they become more than just numbers. Just think about it. A quarter of the world's population was born after that summit. Today, they are 15 years old or younger. Of all these kids, 9 out of 10 now get to go to school. Those who are babies or toddlers are half as likely to die compared to 1990, and their mothers half as likely to die in childbirth. And for the girls among them, well, their chances of having real opportunities, even if by no means equal opportunities yet, have greatly improved at school, at work, in life. In short, many millions have come into a much better world than the generation before them. The Millennium Development Goals have made a difference, and as importantly, they helped us unite against indifference. The European Union helped to drive this agenda because we believe this is in essence what the United Nations was set up to achieve: social progress and a fairer future. We are now ready for the next chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, the MDGs showed us that lack of development of some countries is a threat to all of us. But so is unsustainable development on a global scale. This is the challenge that today we commit to overcome together. That makes the 2030 Agenda even more universal than the previous one. The SDGs are not just for some countries, but for all countries, rich and poor alike. Yes, the list is long, but these goals are comprehensive because they reflect the reality of today's world and the way today's problems are daunting, complex, interlinked. For the very first time in the history of mankind, the boundaries of the planet are actually within sight. Inequalities are increasing. Social cohesion is eroding. Global competition for resources is at an all-time high. The models that worked for so many of us in the past are not ones that will work for all of us in the future. We have to redefine our societies, our relationship with nature. Of course this feels threatening, but fear can be a powerful engine. We have to be creative, because fundamentally this is about rethinking everything we do. All of us, people, companies, governments, international organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, in countries like ours, there is no excuse for not meeting our 0.7% target for official development assistance. It's more urgent than ever. But this time, under the SDGs, it's not about just footing the bill. Those countries fortunate enough to have a developed or emerging economy are committed to play a different role. This is not just about development aid. It's just as much about change at home. My main message, Europe's message to all these countries is, it's also our turn now to step out of our comfort zone. It's about very concrete questions. How we have to turn around our economies to make them circular, leaving behind our take, make, consume and dispose growth pattern. How we must mend our society's social fabric, and how we integrate newcomers, all the more when they come as refugees fleeing war and persecution. It's about clean air, water and oceans, more resilient cities that are healthy, inclusive and safe. About tackling food waste. A third of the food worldwide is thrown away, which is frankly shocking beyond belief. And it's about our collective action to keep the global temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius. These are not impossible goals. We have innovation on our side to find solutions, if we have the will to act. In Europe, we are determined to do this jointly, and we want to fully engage with the UN in experience sharing, capacity building and progress monitoring. We want to do this together. The SDGs will shape our development policy and infuse our policies abroad and at home. Ultimately, this is all about governance, about inclusiveness. Societies will only accept transformation if people feel their voices have been heard. And it's about breaking out of silos. Sustainable development is not just an economic or social challenge or an environmental problem. It's all three. And our efforts on each need to reinforce rather than undermine one another. Ladies and gentlemen, the agenda is about eradicating poverty and putting sustainability at the heart of everything we do. And this is not just the right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do. For our economy, for our environment, for our society, for our children and grandchildren. We have a world to transform. This common agenda shows the way how. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President of the European Union. The Assembly will now hear a statement from His Excellency, Mr. Petro Poroshenko, President of Ukraine.
Dear co-chairs, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Ukraine, I express full support for the new United Nations development agenda. I would like to remind that back to 1992, Ukraine took part in the historic UN summit in Rio de Janeiro, when it testified it will shape the future on the basis of principle of sustainable development. For the 23 years that have passed since then, we have accumulated the extensive positive experience and at the same time tested the bitterness of defeat as proponents of war and terrorism have been resisting fiercely to progress in many parts of the world. The far-reaching sustainable development goals and the targets which we declared as today's historic summit open up the new horizon for the humanity and lay down the foundation for the sustainable development of our planet for the next 15 years. We commend transparency and inclusiveness of the preparatory progress that accumulate in the post-2015 development framework. More than 25,000 Ukrainians took part in the global consultation, having expressed their own vision for the SDG. Working hard to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, which were set up 15 years ago, our country have considerably changes life of millions of the people worldwide. As for Ukraine, I would like to emphasize that we have managed to reduce threefold the poverty rates, yet due to the Russian aggression we expect this rate to drop. To improve the maternal health system, almost half the child mortality, to reduce HIV/AIDS incident rates, and to make a progress on the combat of tuberculosis. We keep on working to fulfill our commitments on MDG related to improving the quality of education, promoting the gender equality, and ensuring the environmental sustainability. I am convinced that we have to build on the momentum generated by MDG to make further progress in the priority areas set out in the post-2015 development agenda. Dear colleagues, there will be no sustainable development without peace and freedom. Ukraine's bitter experience revealed that peace and freedom are principal preconditions to achieve the SDGs. Sustainable development is not achievable without where the explosions are had and peaceful people are killed. It is not achievable where aggressive ideology advocating suppression of some nation by other nation reign and the key human rights and freedom are violated. Strengthening the universal peace and promoting larger freedom should become a driving and unifying force behind our collective efforts toward achieving the SDG. Today, Ukraine has to implement so much needed systemic reform while opposing Russian aggressor that try to undermine the democratic European development the Ukrainian people have chosen. As a result of Russia's treacherous annexation of the Ukrainian Crimea and the aggression in the Ukrainian Donbas region, thousands of the people have been killed. Critical infrastructure has been ruined. Ukraine lost about 1/5 of its economic potential. Russia's military action against Ukraine have also increased environmental and epidemiological threats, as well as the risk of the social exclusion. Chemical sites in the conflict area in the eastern part of Ukraine and in the adjacent territory represent in a particular danger. Threats of the people, threats of the potential man-made technological catastrophe are awful. In this context, Ukraine believes that it is a high time for the United Nations to address the issue of protection of environment in the conflict, and it will present a specific idea in this end. The external aggression has led to the emergence of a new form of the poverty, sudden and unexpected poverty that affects lives about 1.5 million of the internally displaced persons. Each day of this war on Donbas cost us about $5 million that we could have invested into sustainable development. And the crisis with the internally displaced person, 1.5 million, is the biggest problem not only for Ukraine, but for the whole region. Ukraine aspires to peace and prosperity, and together with the partner states accept the maximum efforts to settle the conflict by peaceful diplomatic means. After putting to an end to the military aggression, establishing peace and restoring Ukraine full sovereignty over Donbas region and Crimea, it will be extremely important to bring millions of people back to a normal life, restore economic and social infrastructure on sustainable development principles. Ukraine stands ready to accomplish this uneasy task and calls upon all international partners to cooperate toward this end. Ladies and gentlemen, Ukraine steadily forward the path of reforms set as the Sustainable Development Strategy Ukraine 2020. Despite the existing challenges, we translate our strategic task into the tangible actions. Against the backdrop of implementation of the association agreement between Ukraine and European Union, as well as resistance to the ongoing Russian aggression, the Ukrainian society is focused today first and foremost on the fighting corruption, ensuring equal opportunities and social justice, effective public health system, promoting decent work, ensuring affordable education for all, promoting innovation, development and sustainable infrastructure, ensuring sustainable energy supply, ensuring food security, healthy environment. And I would like to assure all of you that to achieve the SDGs at the national level, Ukraine will implement new programs and projects which are deemed to ensure the practice of macroeconomic stability, environmental balance and social cohesion. The SDGs will serve as an overarching framework for the further transformation in Ukraine, including in the context of the implementation of the Strategy 2020. As a responsible member of the international community, Ukraine strives to take an active part in addressing current global challenges as a prerequisite for achieving SDGs. In particular, in the environmental dimension, we have to act vigorously to prevent threats provoked by climate change and the degradation of the environment. Reaching a compromise on a balanced climate agreement would bode well for our collective efforts toward this aim. Implemented new, expanded model of scientific and technological cooperation between EU member states, in particular establishing a universal mechanism for the technology transfer, is a key to bringing many gaps in a sustainable development. Dear participants of the summit, I am convinced that the working hand in hand and implemented our post-2015 development agenda goals, as well as jointly tackling existing challenges, we will ensure a success of humankind on the path toward progress. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.